In addition to the points made in the previous two lectures, I think we need to spend a little more time on some background about Dublin itself and Joyce's long and mournful love of that city. More than any other novel I am aware of, Ulysses is based on an intricate portrait of the city and its culture, though it is a portrait made by an artist distrustful of his subject, attracted to but disdainful, yes, even a little hateful towards his model. So why Dublin? Joyce once said that he was lucky to have been born in a city large enough to rank as the European capital, yet small enough to be comprehended as a whole. This is quite true of the Dublin we encounter in all of his work, for it's a Dublin caught in amber, and now and forever seen through his portrayal of its real-life inhabitants. It's not a history, by any stretch of the imagination, but we will see how his detailed expression of the city and its people is still so strong in our minds today. Dublin was indeed a small, urban center in his day, about 4.25 kilometers west to east and 3.5 kilometers from north to south. Really nowhere that you couldn't walk in an afternoon, yet having an expansive bus and light rail system, truly making it a modern city. Population was about 245,000 in the census of 1891. Bloomsday is set in 1904, so these census numbers were important to Joyce as he worked remotely in libraries. And most of the middle class of this time had begun to move into the outer suburbs. The city itself was an area of great poverty with large, old homes in the city center, turning to tenement living for the poor. This decentralization is an important factor in modern life of that period, as it is in ours today, and we will see it explored more in later chapters. But for now, remember that Dublin had a thriving suburban rail system that contributed to the physical separation and social interaction between different classes, the beginnings of a commuter culture, while the working generation of its populace would still be more familiar with horse and buggy conveyance for social travel. But it's also a city of enormous literary and academic achievement, a source of tremendous pride to everyday Dubliners. Grinding poverty notwithstanding, Dublin was a city of culture and learning in Joyce's day. So why did Joyce leave? This is a question best answered by reading two of his earlier works, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man and Dubliners. In short, Joyce felt subjected to a kind of paralysis that he felt affected all of the city. When the soul of a man is born in this country, he said, there are nets flung at it to hold it back from flight. You talk to me of nationality, language, religion. I shall try to fly by those nets. Yeah. To my mind, that is the soul of art in a sentence. Yet another good reason to keep reading. During our study of the book, we will encounter and discuss a few glimpses of characters that Joyce himself might have become had he never summoned up the courage to leave Dublin. But it's important to remember that despite all his unhappiness with the culture of that city, he never really left it in his heart, and he carried those streets and those people into all of his work for the rest of his life. What other cities did he live in while writing the novel? Ulysses was written, as it says at the end, in Trieste, Zurich, and Paris. Some fragments and ideas for the story came together in other writings in Pola and some time spent in Rome. But it is important to see here that this novel, allegedly about Dublin and her people, is in fact the work of an artist exploring the social landscape of European cities during an extremely turbulent era. The Dublin seen here echoes all of those cities, just as the novel's characters are stand-ins for many of the conflicts faced by a collapsing economy in an urban environment in a modern life. So as critic Enda Duffy put it, by setting his book in a relatively uneventful earlier year while writing it amid violent, revolutionary, and transformative times, Ulysses can know the future without admitting to such knowledge. It can secrete within its account of a day in 1904 a palimpsest of secret history of the revolutionary occurrences of 1914 through 21, when the book was being written. Duffy's paper here is pretty great, and you'll find it posted in our classroom site. What was happening in Dublin? and around him at the time? I'm not going to go too heavily into historical comparisons on this classroom. There simply isn't time for what could be a whole other area of study. But I do think it important to remember that there is a whole world of conflict going on while the novel is being written. 1914 to 1921 are among the most turbulent years in European culture, and the cities that Joyce was living in during those years were in complete upheaval. There's no major war going on for the Dubliners during the time of the novel's setting in 1904, for the Great War had not started, and the idea of a military posting was still considered to be an important and stable income for Irishmen. But every situation in the novel seems to anticipate the First World War and to presage the Second. The tensions of fascism, nationalism, and racism, along with class disparity, underscore almost every relationship, and it is yet another source of study for this novel to examine how those issues boiled over into major conflicts. But it should also be mentioned that this is an expatriate author writing about his homeland, indeed his hometown, as it undergoes a revolution that changed the colonial structure of European politics. As we will see later, I think the responses to that conflict Joyce gives us in his novel are some of the most forward-thinking, most peace-loving pleas towards national conflicts offered in literature. Should the city itself be seen as a character in the novel? Well, yes, I believe it can, and should, otherwise I wouldn't have asked that question, right? There's a great misunderstanding about the idea of internal monologue as the style of this book. True, that was an initial style Joyce explored, and it did shake a lot of people's impressions of how a book should be written. But it's just one of many tricks he played with here, and it's quickly abandoned in favor of much greater and broader stylistic freedom. Trust me, later in the book, you will be welcoming the few returns that it will make to internal monologue. If the book were simply about Bloom or about Stephen, then we might expect this internal style to persist until their individual experiences and viewpoints eventually came together. That sounds like a clever way to write the thing, doesn't it? But it would not be. And a bit too clever, if you ask me. And the book is great, if you ask me, because it works well beyond its own cleverness. If anything, this book is a flood of styles that puts narratology and authorial voice into question more than the psychology of any of its characters. In this way, it's a collection of voices, the chorus of the city, that it's itself part of the subject. In your reading, I would caution you to always be suspicious of just who is saying what and what agenda they might have and just how they chose to say it. Everyone who speaks is a character within the larger framework of the story, serving Joyce's purposes as a storyteller, of course, but what they have to say, like the gossip of any city, is quite often suspect. Can the Dublin that Joyce described be called a modern city? This is a question that has been raised in classes on a couple of occasions. How much should we be seeing Ulysses as an historical novel? And were the people of his day really like that? Let me start by saying that I personally do not look at this as an historical novel. By this I mean that I do not, as a reader, spend a lot of time factoring differences in our eras of experience into my understanding of its characters in the same way that I might for Melville or even Dickens. There's a personality and a humanity in these characters that I find quite easy to touch without the filter of social history. Some readers do not feel this way and require that filter to forgive many of the idiosyncrasies of the time in which the novel was written. And there are certain passages ahead loaded with what might, to our eyes, seem like unforgivable sexism and racism. And they will be hard to take. It is a novel of its time, though, and the author, like the characters and the situations, reflect that time. And as to the veracity of these characters and their likeness to real or imagined folks of Joyce's day, well, this is also something for debate. I think it's easy for us to lose track of just how educated an educated person was in Joyce's day, and to forget, despite the poverty of their condition, how many of the people we hear from the novel have some degree of education. In fact, many of them are highly educated by our current standards, and Joyce was perhaps humanizing the plight of such educated folks by portraying them in rather desperate situations where we find them. It is yet another theme to be explored, the working poor, of Dublin 1904 is, in most cases shown here, a lot more well-read than the average college student of today, and sadly, a lot more aware of their lack of prospect. But I would, particularly for first-time readers, like to suggest we look at these characters in this city as modern, as very close to our own, and not filtered by the stunted and sometimes superior views that our history affords us. They are different in many, many ways than the citizens of a modern city of this century. Their casual racism and sexism seems horrible now, as it certainly was horrible then, but the readers of the day less than obvious and sadly more culturally pervasive. It should not be forgiven nor overlooked, but to try and normalize or demonize writing from 100 years ago by our understanding of today is both foolish and short-sighted, because there are deeper things to learn from this than becoming bogged down in arguments about the obvious and stilted conventions of that time. There are, if we can see them separated from our own historical context, some very core issues here about acceptance, forgiveness, humility, marriage, paternity, nationalism, colonialism, arrogance, grief, futility, and hope that serve as good mirror to our modern urban world. It might, at times, seem like I'm asking a lot to forgive the scars of this very different time. That's probably true. I am, by nature, a Joyce apologist, in many things, though not all. But it is because I believe there is so much beauty and humanity to be found here, unscarred and beyond apology, if people will just see the novel through its conclusions. Is there still hope for Dubliners to be found in this novel? Perhaps not. Joyce was none too friendly to them by this point in his life, and very few of the characters which he chooses to write about seem to escape those nets I mentioned earlier. He was disdainful of that. He had lost respect for many of his townsfolk, and it shows here. Wow, how it shows. But Bloom, and even Stephen, in his own short-sighted way, do seem to offer some other ways to live and to look at life than the other characters and Dubliners never really see. Personally, I'd like to think this novel shows them how they might shake off their paralysis, even if Joyce himself believes none of them will listen. So there we are. These opening lectures will, I hope, prove useful as a small guidepost into the novel. Ulysses really is quite a lot to get through at first, and maybe this will provide a kind of crash landing pad, foam injected into the terrain of the book's publication and its continued importance as a great work of modernism. But remember, the book is hard, and each chapter is harder and more challenging than the last. You might feel like you've crashed, like the world came up to smack you and you had no control. That's all true. That's the dangerous weather you're flying in. The pilot did everything he could. He righted the plane and took the grounding evenly on its belly. The oxygen masks have been deployed. The hallway lights have come up, showing you safe exits. You can use them at any time. And the escape ramps have been deployed. It is, from the first words on the page, everything you've dreaded and were told it might be. A catastrophe. There are experienced people here on board and on our classroom site. They're not luckier, smarter, nor even more gifted, just experienced, and they can help. You can walk through the smoke and the carnage that everybody avoided and feared, all the people you ever met who might have said, "Oh shit, I couldn't do that." And you've managed it. And oh shit, before you know it, you could be Ulysses. See you next time.